Call the motion to order. Call the meeting to order. Need a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to the general provisions of Article Section 3-305B1 to discuss the confirmation of an appointee to protect the privacy of the individual. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Who made the motion? Josh, got a second by Councilman Holloway. All in favor? Aye. All right, now we're in closed session. Call the meeting to order. For those that would like to, we'll start with the opening prayer and pledge of allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Need a motion to approve the consent agenda and a second.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any discussion? Did we vote on it?
Yeah.
I thought we
You
did.
backwards.
All right. Mr. Roser, can we meet you at the podium? Mr. Roser has become a good friend with many of us through the years, and I think this is going to be his last night with us, and we hate to see him go. So in his honor, we're going to give him a proclamation. So the County Council of Wicomico County, Maryland, it is with great pleasure that the members of the Wicomico County Council extend this certificate of appreciation to Steve Roser, Internal Auditor. Your dedicated service to the citizens of Wicomico County, Maryland, while ever striving to exercise professionalism, good judgment, and fairness. We thank you for your ability to anticipate the needs of your community and the grace you extend to the council, staff, and citizens. We wish you a happy, healthy, and restful retirement, done the 7th day of January, 2020, signed by all council members.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
The floor is yours, sir.
I'll be brief. I know y'all got a long meeting tonight. But I just want to say it's been an honor to serve this county. I want to thank the members of the county council, present and past, especially Joe Holloway, John Cannon, who have been with me since the beginning. Also thanks to other members of the county community, both past and present, especially middle managers and the rank and file. I appreciate their friendship and partnership over the years, and I leave you in the capable hands of Levin Hitchens, and I will miss you all very much. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you, Steve.
He's in a good mood
You know what
today.
you're gonna be doing for the next
He's in a good mood today.
Thank you, Mr. Roser. Next on the agenda, we have certificates of appreciation to Purdue Associates for participating in the Wreaths Across America. Mr. Cannon?
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be able to present these proclamations. I was lucky enough back in December to attend the Wreaths Across America celebration on December 13th at the Civic Center. And I've been there more than 1 year. And every year, it makes you very proud to see how we, pay our respects to the veterans in this community who have served our country. Not only that, but I found that this was very special and always has been a very special presentation. And I'm very, very proud and thankful personally to the Purdue drivers who participated in the Wreaths Across America at the War Memorial at the Civic Center. It's an excellent presentation. They do a very professional job. I'd like you all, if you could, to come forward here, and we have proclamations for each of you.
If you would, you can
If
go
you
to
come
the
on up here,
podium.
if you don't mind. You guys can just on both sides here, however it works for you. There you go. Good to see you. I think one thing everybody should recognize is that each and every one of these drivers are also veterans. I think we should give them a round of applause for that. Well, the certificate reads as such. It is with great pleasure that the members of the Wicomico County Council extend this certificate of appreciation to each of the individuals for your participation in Wreaths Across America. We thank you for your service. We thank you for your selfless act of service to remember our fallen veterans, honor those who serve, and to teach the value of freedom. Signed by all the members of the Wicomico County Council. We'll go in alphabetical order, if that's okay with each of you gentlemen. Anyone that would like to speak, feel free to speak. We're not on any time restraints today, not right now anyway. Yes.
Can I say something?
Certainly, yes, Ernie.
December the 13th, I was unable to attend the celebration, but the gentleman you guys honored that day was my dad. So I will personally thank you for your participation and for being a veteran.
Yeah, thank you. Was that your brother that spoke?
Yes.
Yeah, he did a great job, a very good job. The first certificate goes to Mr. Ray Belote. Would you like to say anything? No. Mr. Henry Bishop. Joseph Calloway. Uncle Buck. Bunk. Uncle Bunk. I'm trying to read Joe's writing here. He said, call him Uncle Bunk. It's actually George Coffin. Joe, it's bad writing. Dave DeWint. Antonio Hall. Tony could not make it? I'll take it. You want it? All right, there you go. Thank you. Darren Hunt. Harley Lewis. Bill C.
Bill C's out of town.
Alex Whittington. But we will get one. All right, thanks a lot. Would anyone have anything they want to say? Go. No?
Don't be bashful.
Shining moment.
All right, George.
You've been drafted
I think somebody was appointed.
again.
I'll always get nominated.
As a group at Purdue, we would like to thank you all for the presentation. It was an honor. It's always an honor to honor our veterans, and we will not stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, John. I'd like to say
most of these drivers also take care in the Teddy Bear Affair over to Holly Center, and I think George Coffin, you helped start that 30-some years ago? 36 years ago, and they've been doing it every year ever since. So congratulations on that one, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, get his address.
We'll worry about, get his address.
Okay.
Mr. Cannon, can you make your way up to the podium?
Certainly. I got it.
We'll wait for them to-
No, yeah, they did.
We ready? Mr. Cannon, on behalf of the Wicomico County Council and your years of service as president, we want to offer you this plaque. Presented to John T. Cannon in recognition of your outstanding dedication and service as president of the Wicomico County Council from 2014 to 2019. There you go.
It's solid gold, just want you to know that. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, gentlemen. I enjoyed every bit of it. It's about 5 years this time and 3 years the time before that. I'm just thankful that you didn't get tired of me and didn't have enough of me and kick me out, okay? But it has been enjoyable. I appreciate it, and looking forward to the next, we got 3 years left? About that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Ms. Hurley?
Good evening, Mr. President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. The first item that we have on the agenda this evening for your consideration is, actually, Mr. Taylor is first on the agenda. We do have a public hearing at 6 p.m.
Mr. Taylor, I think we have public hearing.
Yeah, two items tonight. The first is public hearing. It's Legislative Bill 2019-04, Amendment Number 1. This is the budget bill. That's Legislative Bill 2019-04, and this is the first amendment to the budget. It is an emergency act to amend both the operating budget and the capital budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020, to increase general fund revenue, specifically the use of prior year's fund balance, by $2,516,150.67, and increase the general fund revenue, specifically the FY20 PAYGO portion of the capital budget, allocated for expenditure in the amounts stated herein for these capital projects. 1, Morris Mill Dam, increased construction and inspection costs, and that's $1,381,286.67. 2, water main to airport, increased construction cost, that's $119,000. And 3, roof replacement at the detention center, that's $1,015,864. And we're on for public hearing on that tonight.
Okay.
It was introduced December 17.
Okay. With that said, is there anyone that has anything to say on behalf of this public hearing? The floor is now open. All right, doesn't look like anybody has anything to say. All right, time to close the hearing. Need a motion to approve legislative bill 2019-04, amendment number 1. I need a motion and a second.
Motion moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Hastings and a
Second.
second by Mr. McCain. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there any discussion?
It's too late now.
All right. All right. Is there any opposition? Anybody opposed? All right, so moved. Okay, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, the second item is,
If we can do that by roll call, because it is a legislative bill.
Okay. I'll start with my left. Council Vice President Cannon
Aye.
Aye.
Councilman Hastings, Councilwoman Ackley,
Aye.
Councilwoman McCain,
Aye.
Councilman Davis,
Aye.
Councilman Holloway,
Aye.
and Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Taylor
Yes,
again.
the second item is amendment number 2 to this year's budgets. And this is being introduced tonight. It's Legislative Bill 2019-04, Amendment Number 2. It is an act to amend the capital budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020, to include a project for renovation of bathroom facilities at the Cedar Hill Marina, and appropriate therefore $125,000 from the county's recreation fund pursuant to Section 704G of the Wicomico County Charter.
All right.
I don't know if there's anybody here, well, yeah, maybe if there are some questions, there are people here.
All right. I need a motion to introduce Legislative Bill 2019-04, Amendment 2.
So moved.
Got a motion? Need a
Second.
second. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion? All in favor?
I have a comment.
Yeah, it is an introduction.
Yes,
We still vote on it.
I have a concern on
To
the,
introduce.
I have a concern on the introduction, mainly because it's part of what I think we've faced quite a bit in the past and what we're certainly going to have to address in the future. This is a legislative bill that states very clearly that whereas the Director of Finance has certified that the unencumbered funds are available in the Recreation Fund for such appropriation, due to the fact that Wicomico County does not have a certified Director of Finance, I don't see how the council is at liberty to simply pass this legislation when we do not have an accredited Director of Finance in this county. So again, I just don't understand, I don't see how this can be a valid document to approve with it from this legislative body if we know for a fact that there is an inconsistency in the legislation.
You make a point. Any further discussion?
I would make a motion to table this bill if I could.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to table this bill. All in favor?
You better
Aye.
do a roll call.
All right, we'll do a roll call on this. Councilman McCain,
Opposed.
Councilman Davis,
Aye.
Councilman Holloway,
Aye.
Council Vice President Cannon,
Aye.
Councilman Hastings,
Aye.
Councilwoman Ackley.
Opposed.
Chair votes aye.
So the bill number 2019-04, amendment number 2 has been tabled.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. Ms. Harley?
Okay, next on the agenda is resolution number 01-2020. This is confirming the appointment of Jacqueline Curry as the Director of the Department of Human Resources.
Have a resolution number 1, 2020, confirming the appointment of Jacqueline Curry as the Director of the Department of Human Resources. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Again, Mr. President, I think that we're at an impasse to a certain degree. This confirmation has never been submitted formally to the county council, as the process has been since 2006, since we've had an executive legislative form of government. It's the responsibility of the executive branch to formally submit the application of any department head to the county council. No submission has ever been made. I'm certainly aware of the fact that, as is stated in the resolution, that the council has been made aware of this, but by law, it is required that it be submitted. That has not been done. That being the case, I would simply say it's the obligation of the county council not to take action on this, and I would make a motion to table this.
I would disagree with that.
It's a motion to table.
Right, and I
motion.
disagree with
Requires a
that.
second, but it doesn't have a,
We're still in discussion.
it's a
The-
motion to table, Bill. It doesn't, there's no discussion on the table.
We're still in discussion.
I-
There's a motion to accept the resolution. We're still discussing it.
Mr. President, I made a motion to
Yeah,
table.
Mr. Cannon made a motion. They have a motion to table this.
I'll second that motion. And And this is in no way reflects on the applicant.
Got a motion and a second?
When we get elected,
No discussion.
we stand up at that podium and we raise our right hand and we say we're going to uphold the laws of the state. and the
May I make a,
county.
sorry, Joe, may I make a point of order, please? I'll withdraw my motion to table for discussion because once the motion to table has been recognized and made a second, there is no discussion. So I'll withdraw my motion. Whoever made the second, I assume would withdraw the second.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So we'll stay in discussion. Mr. McCain can have his say, and Mr. Holloway can have
Thank
his
you.
say.
Mr.
Thank you.
Holloway, do you want to finish?
Yeah, I do. You know, we stand up to that podium like any elected official does, and we swear that we're going to uphold the laws of the county. And our charter is not a real complicated document. And it's pretty easy to read. This old country boy can understand it most of the time. And for the county executive to keep snubbing his nose at the charter, it's got to end. And it can't end if we condone it. We can't keep condoning acts that are basically illegal under our charter rule of government. So I'm going to support tabling this until it can be, you know, this problem can be rectified. So.
Mr. McCain?
Yeah, I mean, the points are well taken that are making, but, I mean, we know we have the issues regarding the charter and even the wording regarding this. However, you know, our job is to do what's best for the public, which is we need to move this forward. Frankly, we should have moved the last issue forward. I mean, these are pretty routine issues, and, you know, we've got to continue to do the business of the county. So, you know, I want us to see us approve this individual. It's not the individual's fault. You know, they shouldn't be caught in the middle of this. And same thing with the Parks and Rec. It's not their fault. They shouldn't be caught in the middle of the issue we're currently having with the executive. You know, that's going to continue. That needs to get resolved. I understand the points wholly, but we need to continue to do the business of the county and keep the county moving forward.
Mr. Cannon?
I would just say that it is very simple. It is very cut and dry, similar to what Councilman Holloway said. It is the law, and the process has to be followed by the law. You know, we have the privilege of having the sheriff here, and we have the privilege of having the state's attorney here. They deal in legal matters constantly, and you know, drifting through a stop sign is drifting through a stop sign. It's not stopping. It is drifting through the stop sign. It's illegal. And that's pretty much what we're doing now. We're just drifting through this, and we're not really stopping to take a look at what the true law is and what it states very clearly for all of us. And that is that it has to be submitted. And we cannot act as a body unless it is formally submitted to this council. So again, I would certainly suggest that this be tabled tonight.
Is that a motion?
I was going to let you finish your discussion first.
Is there anyone else that wants to discuss this? Mr. Hastings, it looked like you want to.
Oh, I would just say, you know, we've got a couple folks here that are law enforcement. You know, we have an enforcement issue when it comes to a lot of our well, that's not even disagreements. There's pretty much clear, cut and dry, the difference between what the charter says the legislative branch is supposed to do compared to what the executive branch is supposed to do. We've been kind of, as a group, we've been shouting this to the wind to no avail for quite some time. And I'm not really sure how we really progress on all this, but I do agree the business of government has to continue. You know, we need to get clarity on this as soon as humanly possible. And I'm not sure if anyone's even listening, but it's pretty important, you know. So regardless, for this individual, she's well qualified. She should continue to be in this position, but we need to get clarity when it comes to the difference between what the charter says, what our role is, compared to what the actions of the executive branch. So I'm just putting that out there.
Ms. Ackley?
I think it should be noted again also that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Cannon.
I think it should be noted one more time that this isn't just something the council decided that this was our position independently. The matter of the law was confirmed by not only the county attorney at the time, Mr. Paul Wilbur, but also our council attorney, Mr. Taylor, both have agreed without question that the process has to be followed, the submissions have to be made, and the council has to approve the department heads in order for them to be qualified.
Yeah, and the last comment I'll make, though, is that tabling these issues isn't going to resolve the problems that we have.
But breaking the law is?
We're not breaking the law,
Yes,
Joe.
we are. Yes, we are.
Mr. Taylor, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I don't think it would be breaking the law. I think if you read the charter, it does provide, and Mr. Cannon's absolutely correct, and I've said, because it's very clear, that there is a process for submitting to council the appointment of department heads for confirmation by council. I don't think, however, that because it has not been formally submitted means you can't confirm it. You don't have to confirm it. I certainly recognize that, but I don't believe that because it hasn't been formally submitted, that prevents you from, if you want to confirm it, going ahead and doing that.
So you're saying as our legal counsel, we can ignore the charter?
No, you're not ignoring the charter, because I don't think the charter absolutely says you can't confirm someone if he or she hasn't been submitted. It doesn't say that. You don't have to. I mean, you can insist upon a formal submittal, certainly, if that's your pleasure. But I don't think that it prevents you from going ahead and confirming the person.
But according to the legal counsel, we have been made aware of her employment.
Yeah, well, I mean, she was presented at the last meeting by the county executive,
But it was not an
not
appointment.
not a formal submittal, I guess, and he didn't present it that way. But I think we're certainly aware of the fact that she's been appointed to that position.
The charter states if the council fails to act to confirm or reject any appointment within 30 days of its submission to the county council by the county executive, the appointment shall stand approved. So the charter itself specifically says 45 days from its submission. 45 days, we don't want to try to make out a difference as to whether 45 days starts when they came to our table 2 weeks ago, or whether we met them at Mako a month ago. This formal submission is a written document.
I agree that if it's formally submitted, the 45 days would begin to run. But I don't think the charter language prevents you, even though it hasn't been submitted, from confirming her.
Entertain a motion to table.
Got a motion to table?
I'll second that.
Got a second by Mr. Holloway. All in favor?
All right.
1, 2, 3, 4. Chair votes aye. Any opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
You get 3 opposition. All right, the ayes have it.
Okay.
So it's tabled. And I do agree with what everybody's saying. We need to conduct our business every day, and we do need to follow the charter. We need to find out what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And from this point on, I hope that this council gets together and we find out the right direction to move. I hope everyone's in agreement. Ms. Harley?
Okay, next is resolution number 02-2020, confirming the appointment of David A. Fitzgerald as Deputy Director of the Wicomico County Department of Emergency Services.
Now, it should be noted that this appointment was submitted. So I need a motion to approve resolution number 02-2020 and a second.
Bless you.
Need a motion?
Not me.
No motion? Fails.
Okay, so resolution number 02-2020 for the record failed.
Correct.
Okay, the next item for business is resolution number 03-2020, authorizing the county executive to accept 2 grant awards from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources for the purchase of marine sewage pump-out systems to be used at the Cedar Hill Marina and Nanaco Harbor in the total amount of $29,165. And we do have Mrs. Pam Olin here, who is the Deputy Director of Recreation and Parks.
Need a motion to approve resolution number 03-2020.
So moved.
So moved.
Got one motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion?
Only discussion I have is
Yes, sir.
whether or not it should stick, because it refers to it as grants. Maybe it should state in there, we should amend it to be referenced as reimbursement grants. Small issue, I just didn't know if we should possibly, I make a motion that we, where the terminology references grants, that it be referred to as a reimbursement grant. You guys okay with that? So that's a motion.
You have a motion?
Yes.
Just for clarification,
Can
it's
you
a,
speak up?
just for clarification, it's reimbursement for something that was already done?
Once we do the work, then we turn the invoices in, and then the grant is awarded. Correct, Ms. Owen?
Yes, most of our grants that
Can you
we...
introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm Pam Oland, Deputy Director of Rec Parks and Tourism. Most of our grants that we receive from the state of Maryland are reimbursement grants. We are required to complete the work, either purchase what we need to do, have a contractor come out and do the work, and then we submit the invoices for reimbursement. So the county is fronting the cash on this, but
Okay.
then we'll get reimbursed for it. Again, most of the grants that our department does work in that fashion. This one happens to be a 100% reimbursement grant, so there is no match for the county. If we can accomplish these jobs in the amounts that we were awarded, and we submitted them in the amounts that we believe that they will cost, 100% of the cost of these pump-out station upgrades will be covered by the state.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any further discussion?
I think you need a second for that motion.
Mr. Cannon, you made a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Davis has a second. Any discussion on this? All right, all those in favor of resolution number 03-2020, say aye.
You got to vote on
With the
the
amendment.
amendment first.
But, I'm sorry, I forgot that was an amendment. Okay, we need to vote on Mr. Cannon's amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, all those in favor of resolution number 03-2020, say aye.
As amended.
As amended, thank you, Ms. Early. Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms.
Okay.
Hurley.
Next is resolution number 04-2020, extending the date of the adoption of the fiscal years 2021-2025 capital improvement program from the third Tuesday in February to June the 1st, 2020. The county executive has requested that the date of the adoption of the CIP be extended so that it can be adopted simultaneously with the expense budget for fiscal year '21. And because there's uncertainty as to the potential impact of state legislation on capital projects during the 2020 regular session of the Maryland General Assembly.
All right. Need a motion to approve resolution number 04-2020.
So moved.
Got a motion, need a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion? All in favor of resolution number 04-2020, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Okay. Next is resolution number 05-2020, designating persons for training under the Open Meetings Act. State law requires each public body to designate at least one individual who is an employee or a member of the public body to receive training of the requirements of the Open Meetings Law. This resolution is designating all council members to receive the training. Training is to be completed within 90 days after being designated, and the training can be taken online, and classes are offered by the Maryland Association of Counties.
That's correct. Need a motion to approve resolution 05-2020. Got a motion, need a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Ms. Hurley, we did that,
Yeah.
or some of us took that at Mako.
Yeah, last year we did.
So does this mean we do this again?
No, if you've taken the training, you only
So
have
we're-
to do it one time, but we do have, a new council member on board, so.
I
And they
did.
recommend that we actually designate someone each year and just keep the record in our files.
Being she's new, make her do it twice.
Are we going to have like a policy and procedure manual for open meetings coming from this training?
We have open meetings law that we follow,
Okay.
and I know that Mako also offers classes on that.
I wonder if they have written policies for specific open meeting documentation. This might be a good time to implement that.
We can look into it.
Okay.
It is.
All right. All in favor of resolution number 05-2020, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right.
That's all I
time-
have.
Yes, ma'am?
I was just saying that's all I have.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Public comments. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Do we have anybody that would like to go to the podium? Usually we have a lot of people. Sure? Okay, council comments. Any council comments? Mr. Hayes? Mr. Hastings?
I was just say I just I received about close to 50 letters from Meals on folks in my district that have been receiving some of the benefits of the Meals on Wheels, and they were actually very happy that this body took the time to approve extra funds, gap funding, and it was actually some really heartfelt letters. There's a lot of folks in our community that are really struggling. A lot of folks in their 80s and 90s who, I could still read most of their handwriting, but you could tell that it was really a struggle for them to get this out. So I really wanted to say thanks to Mac and a lot of the folks who help keep this program going. So thank you for that. And then also Steve's gone, but I just want to say Steve Roser's an amazing human being. He's done a great job, so I really appreciate his service. And go Ravens.
Thank you, Mr. Hastings. Mr. Cannon?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I really appreciate Mr. Roser's work. Joe and I think Bill too, we were here when we initially hired Mr. Roser, and we didn't know what to expect. I don't know if he knew what to expect either, but it turned into a really great number of years, and he took charge of this and really made it a very effective operation, and I thank him for that work that he's done. Wish him the best. Also, I also got the 20 or 30 cards in the mail. I thought I was really popular. I thought a lot of people liked me because I got all these Christmas cards. I didn't know what it was, and lo and behold, it was about 20 of these little cards of thank you where they had each taken their time to say, Meals on Wheels has really been great to me. We really appreciate the food. And they weren't just, stamped thank yous. They gave this some thought and took the time to do it. And believe me, people say, why do you run for office, John? It's a thankless job. But there are small moments like that where you get letters like that make it worth it. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Zach?
My district had reached out to me last week, thanking the council for the support of the letter for Comcast to do broadband in the rural areas. I even had a little boy call me and thank the council for doing it, as he's can't access his homework because he doesn't have internet. So he's very excited to have that coming. And just to mention that you can go on Comcast, or I'm sorry, Chop Tank's, I apologize, Chop Tank's website, and there's a link there that you can contact your senator to support that in your area also.
Okay. Any more comments?
You're looking at me, but I'll follow.
Come on, Bill, you have something.
I'll follow Josh's suit, but go Clemson Tigers. That's the only game that counts.
Mr.
I want to
Davis?
thank Mr. Roser for all the help he's given me. When I first come on the council, I was a new guy on the block, and there's a lot of stuff to absorb, and you couldn't get it fast enough. But anytime I called Steve, he was able to find stuff and help me along the way. And I really want to thank him for all the work he's done for us. And it's going to be a loss with him, but we got Levin here who's been trained well. So I think everything will roll over smoothly. So again, I thank Steve for his work, and I hope he enjoy his vacation.
Joe?
Dittos to what Ernie John and everyone has said tonight about Steve. I was here when the situation arose that we needed a internal auditor. That was suggested by the fraud auditor when we went through the issues we had at the landfill. And I know there was a lot of people that didn't agree with that position to begin with. A lot of people were fearful of that position, a lot of departments, employees, and Steve made that transition very easy. He went out and talked to people. They weren't afraid to see Steve come. It wasn't like the IRS was showing up or something like that. And he made that transition in for that position very easy with our county employees. And I think that's important, and I think we need to retain that position. I think it's a safeguard to have an internal auditor. They play more than just the role of going out and doing an audit. I know in the past, Steve has helped us with our budget, and I'm sure Levin will be doing the same. We always have questions. I know some of this stuff is over our heads sometimes. So I'm looking forward to serving with Levin and want to wish Steve good wishes on his retirement. Thank you.
Thank you. On presidential comments, I think everybody touched on everything, and I do want to welcome Mr. Hitchens aboard, and I do want to congratulate Steve on his retirement. He did a great job, and as Councilman Holloway said, that position's important. It's also in the charter, so it's a required position. Mr. Hitchens has been here the last 2 years. I mentored under Steve, and I have the utmost confidence in Mr. Hitchens, and welcome aboard. Thank you. Starting next Wednesday, the MACO will have their legislative committees meet every Wednesday throughout March, from this month throughout March, and we're going to meet on a lot of issues dealing with counties. And Ms. Hurley and I, Mr. Cannon, we went up there almost every week the last 5 years, and it's going to start again. So we'll be up there every single Wednesday. Any council member is more than welcome to attend. We'll be leaving here about 7:30. So with that said,
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
It's been brought to my attention as a point of order, if I could, that on Resolution 02-20, there was no motion or second on the part of the council on the confirmation. But if that's done, if no action is taken, there has to be some type of consideration made. In other words, there has to be a motion, a second to introduce the resolution. Then it can be voted down. And the individuals that may make that motion second may still vote it down, but it has to come to the table, or else it's will be considered as a motion to in the affirmative.
Okay.
So I would like to make a motion to reconsider Resolution 02-2020. That has to be done first.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second to reconsider 02-2020.
Right.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
All in favor of.
All in favor of?
All in favor of reconsidering, bringing it back to the table.
Reintroducing.
Yeah, bring it back to the table.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Do we have any discussion?
Well, you need to reintroduce the motion,
Okay, I can reread it.
just the resolution number.
I think you bring up a good point, Mr. Cannon, and I'm glad you brought it up. Resolution number 02-2020.
Just a motion to introduce it.
I'm sorry?
Just need a motion to introduce it.
Yeah, okay, I thought we had the motion.
No, that was a motion
that was to
reconsider.
To reintroduce, okay, so now we need the motion to vote on
Right.
The
resolution
I'll make that motion.
number 02-2020, confirming the appointment of David Fitzgerald. Got a motion,
And I'll second it.
got a motion and a second.
Okay, now you need a roll call vote.
Okay,
Well, you don't
any
need a-
discussion? All right, roll calls, begin with Mr. McCain.
Abstain.
Mr. Davis.
No.
Mr. Holloway.
No.
Mr. Cannon.
No.
Mr. Hastings.
Nay.
Ms. Ackley.
No.
The chair votes nay.
And for the record, that means resolution number 02-2020, confirming David A. Fitzgerald as the Deputy Director for the Department of Emergency Services fails.
All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, President Dodd.
right? I got a motion to adjourn. To adjourn from legislative session to go into open work session followed by closed work session pursuant to general provisions of Article Section 3-305, B17 as follows. To consult with legal counsel to protect the attorney-client privilege, to discuss compensation of an employee, in closed session to protect the privacy of the individual. Do we need a motion for this?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
So moved.
Got a motion, then need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. All right. We're going to go into open session. Sure. With possible legislation to prohibit consumption of marijuana in public areas. Sheriff Mike Lewis, Ms. Jamie Dykes.
My deputy state's attorney, Billy McDermott.
You can bring him up and introduce him.
Thank you, President, Vice President, Council. Thank you. No, thank you, sir. Thank you for considering introducing, Council, this is my deputy state's attorney. For those of you that haven't met Billy yet, Billy McDermott. He was appointed on January 7th of last year.
Yes, sir. And good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. Let me first just apologize. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can pull it closer to you.
I just wanted to take a moment and apologize for my attire. I had a wardrobe malfunction earlier today, and so that is why I'm in jeans. I sincerely apologize.
You look fine to me.
Yep.
Field trip took him out of
It did.
suit attire. So
We weren't sure whether you were being properly compensated by the state's attorney's office.
I was going to address that, but I figured in closed session.
We'll see it in budget.
So, thank you for entertaining, for hearing from us. The reality is that there has been some ambiguity created by appellate courts as to the legality of marijuana and the risk that it poses to public safety when people consume marijuana on our roadways and sidewalks. Billy has worked close with the Fruitland City Council and Chief Swafford to introduce, and legislation was actually passed there, I believe, late last year.
That's correct.
So I would, the sheriff is in support of this. I believe I will defer, as Billy's heavily researched the topic, I'll defer to him if that's all right, President.
Mr. McDonald?
Thank you. So Ms. Dykes is correct. Fruitland unanimously passed what is and what has been submitted to this body late last year. It was approximately 2 weeks ago, so that everybody kind of has an understanding of the legal landscape of where we find ourselves with respect to this law, but perhaps in marijuana in general. There was recently a decision out of the Court of Appeals, and that was a case by the name of Pacheco. It's State v. Pacheco. And while we have continued to evolve in the legal landscape as it applies to marijuana, Pacheco took a turn out of the Court of Appeals that I don't think many legal scholars were expecting. It is somewhat inconsistent with the other holdings of the same court. And so we were scrambling to kind of figure out where Pacheco left us. To give you just a broad overview, what Pacheco stands for is the premise that on the odor of burnt marijuana alone, law enforcement can no longer arrest a person. That is no longer probable cause, nor can they search a person incident to that arrest. It doesn't seem like that is that significant, but that is a gross departure from where we have always been with respect to the odor of marijuana. As Sheriff Lewis, I'm sure, will undoubtedly tell you, because Sheriff Lewis and I have traveled to Annapolis many times to talk about, it's not just the marijuana that you find in a car. It's that drugs and guns and things like gangs go together. And so when you lose the ability to perhaps arrest a person and search a person incident to that arrest, you possibly lose out on finding other contraband on that particular person. So that's problem number one that we were aiming to address. I had a conversation with Chief Swafford. Chief Swafford and I got together, and we were able to work with their town council and kind of carve out what I consider to be a safe haven in the entire state of Maryland. Fruitland is the only jurisdiction, as far as I know, that is now carved out a Pacheco exception. If you were to talk to law enforcement, the Sheriff, I'll let you address this issue, but I think if you were to ask law enforcement across the state, they would probably universally support this proposition, because I don't even know that the Court of Appeals were anticipating some of the ancillary effects to which we see. That's issue number one. Issue number two, which I think is also important, is parity. Because as legal professionals, we are all about parity. We want to treat everyone equally. And so just to give you the juxtaposition of two similarly situated people, if you were to be consuming alcohol on a public street, if you were to be consuming alcohol in your vehicle, you would be violating the law. Even though alcohol, we can all agree, has been legal since Prohibition ended, you still can't consume it in public and you still can't consume it while in your vehicle. It's a decency law. It's a quality of life law that affects just about everybody, everywhere. Just because marijuana has now an exception and you can possess marijuana legally by way of a medical marijuana card, that doesn't mean that you should be allowed to consume marijuana in public, as the statute says, on public street fairs, on sidewalks, in a shopping center, or more importantly and concerning for people in law enforcement like ourselves, is you shouldn't be able to consume it while in your vehicle. There are two problems associated with that. The one is obvious. The first one is, of course, if you're consuming marijuana in your vehicle, where are you going next? As Sheriff Lewis, I'm sure, can tell you, the prosecution, the enforcement of driving under the influence of marijuana is not as easy as driving under the influence of alcohol. We have intoximeters to test people's breath to tell you exactly how much alcohol they've consumed. We don't have that same mechanism for driving under the influence of marijuana. And so what we have to rely on in the prosecution of those cases are drug recognition experts. They are not easy to come by. Though they are extraordinarily well trained, they're expensive to train. And so prosecuting those who are under the influence of marijuana is something that is actually quite hard to do. And so what we're aiming to do is first ensure that we remain with the same quality of life that existed before Pacheco, that we ensure that the decency laws that affect those who may consume alcohol are in parity with those who consume marijuana, but also to protect against those who may get behind what is a 5,000-pound weapon after having consumed marijuana and oftentimes take the lives of those who have absolutely nothing to do with the consumption or use of marijuana. And so for all of those reasons, this law simply seeks parity with the alcohol laws, but also to take us simply back perhaps 4 months ago to where Pacheco and its ramifications took us to a place that I don't think anyone intended.
So is this similar to if you're taking a prescription medication that the bottle will say, do not drive under the influence of this medication? When you're being prescribed marijuana, does it have that same labeling?
You know, it's a good question. So I don't want to answer that because I've never been prescribed marijuana, right? So I don't exactly know.
I will tell you,
But
there are attestation forms that are signed by every medical marijuana card holder that says they will not operate a motor vehicle under the influence of medical marijuana.
Okay.
They have to sign that form at the dispensary.
Okay.
And my question was, we heard about that. Have you, or are you aware of anyone being arrested or detained because of smoking and then driving, or being out in public and smoking?
It happens every day.
Okay.
It's like Mr. Deputy State's Attorney McDermott just said, it remains a criminal offense to operate a motor vehicle while consuming alcohol. It remains a criminal offense to have an open container of alcohol in a motor vehicle. It is a civil infraction if you have less than 10 grams of marijuana in a vehicle. It makes no sense at all. It's a civil infraction. Number two, if you don't pay the citation or appear for court, you will be arrested. Your license will be suspended. If you don't pay the civil citation of $100 for possessing less than 10 grams of marijuana, there are no penalties at all. None. It's just unfair.
So
Just unfair.
the main goal,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're entirely right, Mr. Sheriff.
Yeah.
main goal of this is basically, so if you're under the assumption that somebody's using marijuana in an automobile, that you can stop them and look for other contraband.
Well, if we observe any driving behavior, we're going to stop them anyway. But once we detect the odor of burnt or burning marijuana coming from the vehicle, the Pacheco case says it is not probable cause to search that individual.
Okay.
We just don't have that, or to arrest that individual.
Is this, if this is passed as a county law, will this cover Salisbury?
It will cover the city of Salisbury and all of Wicomico County and further protect the citizens living in this county and those who travel to and through this county.
Can we, Laura, could we do this as emergency legislation to step it up if we wanted to?
It would have to be for the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens.
Well, I think it's just been.
Absolutely. As Madam State's Attorney started out, there's so much ambiguity in the law right now. And here's a prime example, and I want to share this with you. I'm traveling on Route 13 bypass several months ago. I see a vehicle coming up behind me at a high rate of speed. As the vehicle goes by me, I see two young girls in the front seat of the car, the operator and the right front outboard passenger. I see a small child I learned was 19 months old sitting in the back seat and a child safety seat. What I saw them do as they traveled past me, they were passing a joint back and forth smoking marijuana going down the road. I ultimately paced them at 81 miles per hour. When I stopped them for the speed and got both ladies out of the car and began to search them, they asked me what I was doing. I said, "You can't ride down the road and smoke marijuana." The first response from the driver was, "Sir, marijuana is legal now. You can't be doing this." They really thought marijuana was legal. There's so much ambiguity in the law right now. Marijuana remains illegal. Less than 10 grams is a civil infraction. 10 grams or more is a criminal infraction. One open can of alcohol in your vehicle remains a criminal offense. Wow. But you can have several joints, less than 10 grams, and be a civil infraction. With no ramifications, Joe, if you decide, I'm not paying that $100 fine that Mike Lewis gave me, and there's nothing we can do about it.
But Sheriff, what we're looking at here doesn't change any of that.
Sir?
But what we're looking at here doesn't change anything in that example you're just
No,
giving.
but it's going to give us greater ability to enforce the law, number one. Number two, to protect the citizens traveling into and through this county and our citizens living in this county. And number two, give us the authority to search motor vehicles for greater contraband. So many of my large cocaine seizures and heroin seizures have started out based on the odor of marijuana coming out of a car. And then you search the vehicle, and in one probable cause case, we found 2 dead bodies in the trunk of the car. So that happens based on the odor of marijuana coming from the vehicle.
Mr. McDermott, in
Yes,
your beginning comments, I think you said that actually Fruitland, they're the first municipality to actually do an exception to.
As far as I know, Councilman.
As far as I know as well.
I can't
Right.
say for sure, but as
And
far
they
as
just
I know.
adopted this, is it December?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I mean, do you anticipate any challenges to this?
Listen, I think in an adversarial system of prosecution, there's always going to be challenges. Those challenges are going to be suppression issues, and we'll deal with them at the district court level and then probably at the circuit court level if they should be appealed. But I don't think that they're going to be challenged on the constitutionality and or whether or not legislative bodies like yourselves can pass those laws. I'll defer to your legislative attorney right now, but this has not been preempted by the state. You have the ability to make more restrictive laws than that which come from Annapolis. And to Mr. Sheriff's point, I think what he was saying is that this law sends a clear message. Sure, we can't undo what Annapolis has done with respect to marijuana, medical marijuana, and or the decriminalization of marijuana less than 10 grams. But what you can do is you can normalize it to a certain extent. In his example, and I think it's important to note, if we were to walk out your doors tonight and there were to be a man consuming an open beverage of Michelob Ultra and another man who had been legally prescribed marijuana sitting next to him smoking his marijuana, he could enforce the law against the man drinking the alcohol, but not against the man who was literally smoking a marijuana cigarette outside your doors this evening. It seems that we need parity in that particular law for obvious reasons that don't even include those of which law enforcement are aimed at protecting.
Well, should we change the
It's gotta be fair
alcohol
across the
laws?
board.
Mr. Hastings?
Or should we not change the alcohol laws in this case?
Are you asking should we not?
You say if it's an issue of parity, you have 2 people sitting next to each other, one with a joint, one with a beer. Don't we need to now start looking more at our alcohol laws?
Well, listen, I'm certainly not a legislator. Our jobs as prosecutors are simply to enforce the laws on the books. But if you are asking whether or not I think you should decriminalize the public consumption of alcohol and or those who might be intoxicated publicly, I think my answer would be no, but I'm just a citizen.
Obvious question. We have a $100 million structural deficit in Maryland. The Kerwin Commission we've all been hearing about and talking about, that's a $4 billion endeavor. Senator Eckert said last night she expects, they're going to take up recreational marijuana pretty soon. Surprised the whole crowd when she said that. There's no more money at the state level there's no spaces for new tax revenues there. The federal government doesn't have it. Maryland Association of Counties continues to say, well, there's really, all of our county budgets are tapped. So I think the obvious, piece is, well, it looks like you're going to have, following the other, I don't know how many states now have passed recreational marijuana. Isn't Maryland probably going to be soon? And so how do we, if we take this now, how does that change within the next year or 2 years when recreational marijuana is legal?
So I really appreciate the question, and thank you for the opportunity to address that. A couple of things to your point. First, let's start with the other jurisdictions that have passed recreational marijuana. And I'll defer to Mr. Sheriff, but we have, in law enforcement, studied this with microscopes. I don't want to sound like Chicken Little, but if you look at states like Colorado and California, the number of manslaughters related to motor vehicle deaths has gone up nearly 400% the last time I checked. If you're asking simply because everybody else is doing it, what are we going to do? I would hope that we would strongly oppose it. But again, I'm just a prosecutor. If your question is what happens next year if we do pass recreational marijuana, I would say absolutely nothing. Because the same way that alcohol is legal right now, and you can go consume alcohol in the privacy of your home or at a bar or wherever it is that you want, if they were to say tomorrow, recreational marijuana is passed, you as this body can still say, but you can't smoke it in public. You can't walk down the sidewalk, you can't walk down the street, you can't consume it in the Salisbury Mall. You still have the ability to do that. And so I don't think, if you're asking legally, but I defer to your counsel attorney, I don't think that it affects at all if Annapolis says tomorrow recreational marijuana is legal. With respect to your questions about the Kerwin Commission, the only thing I'll note is when we pass medical marijuana, and people like the sheriff and myself and a lot of other people traveled there and said, please don't, we were told, it's okay, we're going to tax it. We still haven't taxed it. And so the idea that we're going to find landfills of money based in recreational marijuana, we were told that years ago, and that didn't come to fruition yet.
Yeah, well, we've never been this broke before. So.
In response to your accident deaths,
please,
I'd like to note that automobiles are the safest they've ever been, but we still have an increase in accident deaths because of intoxication.
Absolutely.
I have to tell you, and this is just anecdotal, there are 3 people up here right now who have prosecuted and enforced all manner of homicides. But there is almost nothing as awful as when you come upon a motor vehicle homicide. And there is nothing as tragic and senseless as when a person is robbed from this earth by someone who simply decided that they were going to use recreational marijuana and then get behind a vehicle or alcohol or whatever it is. All I can say is when you look at states like Colorado and California, I think a lot of people there, probably in law enforcement at least, regret those decisions. And there are a lot of people who, since the passage of those laws, have lost their lives and family members. And that's the only caveat. I make that only as a person, a civilian, and certainly not in any official capacity.
We're all aware of the horrors of secondhand smoke with cigarettes. I don't want secondhand smoke from marijuana. I know that. I don't even like sitting next to someone if I'm at a ball field and they sit down next to me and all you can smell is marijuana. I find that terribly unpleasant and uncomfortable.
You don't want to come to my house.
Yeah, there is an individual who actually works for the federal government and was in Salisbury with us at one point in time. And we were at the mall, and we were walking by a car. And for a minute, I thought it might be somebody vaping, but you could smell the marijuana right away. This individual immediately stopped and went 2 cars down and around. And I was like, well, what are you doing? And he was like, I cannot go by that. If I accidentally inhale that, I'm not really feeling secure that if I have a drug test 2 days from now, just an arbitrary drug test, that they might not find some form of THC in my system, and I would lose my job.
It's a valid concern.
Yes, and I think that's where this impacts people, more so than I think that the average citizen might be aware of.
We're not restricted. This law doesn't restrict the rights of somebody doing it in their home or doing it.
Absolutely not.
Nope.
Absolutely not.
And
absolutely not. Where they should be doing it to begin with.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with it.
It's under our decency laws.
The problem is, when you do put somebody behind the wheel doing this.
A 4,000 or 5,000 pound missile.
And,
To follow up with John, he's talking about the smell of marijuana. I got one of those hemp fields right down the street from me. And the reason why I said, John, you don't want to come to my house.
I was a little concerned.
We're all wondering about what Ernie's doing, right?
If I was to put you in my car, and when they had that field going, and we rode by that field, you would think you were smoking marijuana. Those fields are that strong.
And you brought, Ernie has brought that to my attention on a number of occasions, which prompted me to drive to this hemp facility and tour that facility. And I was on my way home from Baltimore on a Friday night, and on the bypass, I could smell that hemp facility on West Road, Northwest Road. It hit me like a sack of potatoes in the face, and I thought it was unfair that I had to smell that. I really had to be hit in the face with that. And to live near it, like your constituents do, it would be a genuine concern of mine every day.
Well, the thing of it is,
Absolutely.
they said it doesn't get into your system, but it hadn't been proven. And for me, I got 5 school buses, CDL drivers, and they have to ride by this thing every day. And to say, like you said, to smell it, who to say it won't get in their system one time, and they get drug tested, and they fail.
Yeah, to Ernie's point there,
Mr. Taylor had a comment. He's been waiting.
But just a couple things, only because I've been referred to a couple times. Yeah, I can't really speak to the preemption issue on that. I do however, it might be of interest to council, a discussion of the KO case. And it was in the Bar Journal. I don't know if you've seen it. If you all have it, I can certainly send it to you, but you might want to, council might want to read it. Unfortunately, I think it shows how hard it is to predict what might happen if this goes up.
Right.
Because look what they did in Pacheco, for example.
Well, we
And I
also
just
look back
offer
to
one other observation. I happened to attend a Seattle Mariners game a couple years ago, and you don't have to buy it on the street. Just go to the Mariners game.
Mr. Hastings.
theoretically, so to a very good point there, to what Councilman Davis was basically saying. I don't know if you saw the piece that was done on CNN not that long ago about medical marijuana, and there's now, but basically, from what I understand, you can't really tell the difference in the smell with THC. You could have a very low THC amount, which a lot of children and young adults who still get a lot of childhood. I don't know what they are, the seizures that they get.
Sure.
It takes it down from, it was ridiculous. One of the ones they had on the program, you had 30,000 seizures in a month. She went down to 2. But she's essentially, it's weird to see a child smoking marijuana. And it looks, but it's low. Of course, the THC is such a very small amount, but it's largely the other cannabis, or what is it called, the other part of it that is apparently is the medical part of it. So how would we write legislation that is adequate, that takes into account, I don't know, everything there's creams, there's from what I understand, other kind of things. The facility that is, I've not been in it, but the facility is in my district here, the medical marijuana facility, and from what I understand, they have a lot of edibles or other kind of things that I don't know how you make that determination, or if you have a kid with seizures or a teenager with seizures and looks like they're smoking,
Or autism.
There's a whole litany of other diseases that folks are using, but you can't tell the difference in smell, and I don't know, theoretically, I'm not really sure how it works here.
Yeah, and listen, I want to be careful because we're not medical professionals, and so I don't want to overstep what our wheelhouse is. I do know that the statutes refer to consumption, and consumption has a legal definition, and so certainly you could define consumption to be ingest, consume, apply the topical solutions. Those are in the medical marijuana situations of which you're talking about. But I also want to be clear too, right? Medical marijuana purpose aside, whether or not you think it's good, bad, or not, it matters not, right? What we're saying is we can't do anything about that. Annapolis, in my opinion,
Nor do we want to.
Right,
It's done.
Right,
It's done.
They've preempted the field on that. All you can do now is legislate more restrictively. So can you do those things in public? For the child you're talking about, there seems to be a legitimate medical purpose, right? Whether or not that child needs to be consuming that marijuana like on the steps of Shorebird Stadium is a question that I think is what this body needs to deal with. But one last point that I want to make very briefly, in addition to all the things we've talked about, certainly Madam State's Attorney and I can tell you about something that we are seeing a lot more often and certainly popped up in states like Colorado and California, which is, it's a a mental disorder, which is now in the DSM-5 called cannabis-induced psychosis. It is something that we are seeing in those states, and we are seeing right here in Wicomico County, where essentially what it stands for is if you smoke marijuana over a period of time, so often that it alters the chemical composition of your brain such that it mimics the exact effects of psychosis. And so legal or mental professionals cannot diagnose the difference between someone suffering from schizophrenia and cannabis-induced psychosis. And from a very practical perspective, what that means for prosecutors is if someone comes to us mirroring the images of schizophrenia, a public defender or a defense attorney is going to file what's known as a not criminally responsible, basically an insanity. A mental health professional will see them, say, sure, looks like schizophrenia because we can't tell the difference. That person will go to a mental health facility where they'll remain until someone says he no longer suffers, he's not on medication. Oops, it must have been cannabis-induced psychosis, and that person's going to be released. There is a case currently pending where a person murdered his mother, was diagnosed with schizophrenia, found to be not criminally responsible, right here in Wicomico County, and the mental health professionals are telling us now, sorry, we got it wrong, it was actually cannabis-induced psychosis, because the cannabis of today is nowhere near the cannabis of 20 or 30 years ago. And so for all of the reasons that we've talked about, there are so many ancillary effects, and all this says is, if you're gonna do it, just do it at home.
That's all, it's that simple.
Ms. Holloway?
No, I'm fine. You know, I think I said what I wanted to say.
Just maybe commenting on, I think, what Mr. Hastings was saying. I think the way Fruitland's ordinance reads, it's strictly marijuana only. It wouldn't be some chemical extraction. Perhaps it should be, but that's not the way it reads.
I'd lost my train of thought a little bit there. You know, a few weeks ago, we passed the balloon legislation, Wicomico County. It looks like the state is, and we followed Queen Anne's County. Is there a possibility if we pass this, there'll be other counties that may pick up on this?
I believe so.
Have you been talking to other counties about it?
I have not, but I will should this
So
pass.
far, it's been the three of us plus Chief Swafford and the Fruitland Council.
I mean, if they see the reasons and reasoning for it, or the success of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As we keep our perspective, try to keep our perspective, I think about the story that you told about the 19-month-old in the car. Like, we have normalized marijuana to the extent that children are smoking marijuana. They have developing brains. I mean, it's insanity. And then we have children, like a 19-month-old, that's exposed to that, and the long-term effects of that are just, it's, from a public safety perspective, I urge you to act now. I mean, it is, while the sheriff can make an arrest, under suspicion of somebody driving a vehicle under the influence, the reality is proving that beyond a reasonable doubt in court is a whole nother ball of wax.
Laura, does this legislation need to come from the executive? Can we enact it ourselves, and can we do it as emergency legislation if so be it?
So this body can introduce legislation. It does require the county executive's
Signature.
Is he supportive
approval on
of this?
it. He can veto it if he wanted to, and you can override the veto.
I think he has to make a finding of emergency, too.
Yes,
Yeah,
and he would
yeah.
have, to if you want an emergency legislation, that has to come from the county
You can't just say it's emergency, there has to
executive.
be some specification.
Well, we've justified that it's a public safety issue, right? Or you
Well,
think it's justified as a
And
public
one
safety?
quick question, just as a point, if it's emergency legislation, do we still though get, I still want to be able to look at the wording in terms of, I don't want to necessarily just adopt this verbatim. We might want to add to it or
Amend it or whatever.
massage it or, give our own twist to it. We'll still have that opportunity. I guess is my question. I'm not sure how we're
So where do we go from
proposing
here?
this. Are we just proposing this?
If council is interested in having similar legislation introduced, Mr. Taylor and I can work on putting something in draft form for your consideration at the next meeting.
Do we
Yeah,
have a
right, yeah, that's probably-
consensus? Do we have a consensus?
Yes.
And may I suggest, as passionate as these three are, that
Absolutely.
you include them in working on this legislation? And then when should we meet, the next meeting?
I think we can have it ready by the next meeting.
Are you guys okay with that?
Yes,
Yep.
we'll be
We'll be
here.
here.
All right.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Thank you all.
Gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you, Council.
Great
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you.
And I'll be there Saturday night, the Ravens game.
Thought you were going to say you were going to the Seattle Mariners game.
up here.
I'll get you the same copy.
Okay, next on the agenda is County Legal Services, Mr. Bob Taylor.
Is he here?
He was.
As much as he disagrees with me.
Hey, you're on deck, Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Dodd, my understanding was the purpose of this open work session was to discuss with the county executive going forward on appointment of a new county attorney. I guess that's not going to happen tonight for obvious reasons. I can explain further if you'd like me to. I've suggested that, this has reached the point where serious things are going to happen shortly, bond financing, as an example. Without a county attorney, I think we've duly appointed, I think we've got a real problem. And I think one way of addressing that is to notify parties that could be affected by this, and I'm thinking of the Board of Education, the bond counsel that we use, Davenport and Company, which is kind of a financial advisor in terms of bond financing.
That's correct.
Of the situation, and hopefully try to, bring things to a head or at least save expense, rather than have them do work for the county and the council feel that they can't go forward because of the situation. There's a draft letter that's in the book, and I would suggest that we send that letter out.
Okay. I think what we're doing is pretty much kicking this can down the road by not acting on it, but we're kind of limited to what we can do. Is there any discussion? Mr. Cannon?
I'd like to see the letter go out. I think that's important to get it out.
And the draft letter you're referencing is the one dated,
It's January 8
January
to
8.
various outside parties. Yeah. It's a one-page letter.
there's a couple here.
Would have enclosure, so.
Do we have a consensus?
I'm sorry. President Dodge, did you?
Mr. Taylor's talking about sending a letter to the affected parties about our lack of having a county attorney.
Would that be to the mediator?
That would be to the bond market, Board of Education.
You
You
say,
okay with it, Josh?
well,
Josh, okay?
I guess one question, you just said the bond market,
Well,
No.
Yeah,
Mr. Taylor
bond
mentioned
counsel,
bond counsel.
bond counsel, yeah.
Right.
So we got 4.
All right, we got enough.
Ernie go? Oh, he's here.
All right, let's move forward on that. Anything else?
That's it, on that item, yes.
Mr. Cannon, your letter of support for the state legislation on eviction procedures in Wicomico County.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is just a letter of support for the legislation that went up last year. It passed unanimously in the House and last year unanimously, and there was a hiccup in reference to the committee presentation with the Senate. So what happened, the bill had to go into committee. It was introduced to the Senate at the last hour after having passed the House, and because it was sent to committee, the bill was sort of like, it wasn't killed, it just never was put into effect. So we reintroduced it again, we've cross-filed it, we're cross-filing it with the Senate and the House of Delegates, so that we'll make sure that it's done in a more timely fashion, simply requiring or requesting from the county council here that they have a letter of support saying they're in favor of the same, nothing's changed, it's the same bill as was presented last year. The mayor of Salisbury has given his approval on that, and they've had staff giving testimony in Annapolis. I went to give testimony last year in Annapolis as well, and Sheriff Lewis has also sent a letter in support of this legislation.
So we already have the same letter prepared. Just
The letter is prepared in the brief book, yes.
reintroduce
Have
that.
the
Mr. Davis?
bill been reintroduced this year or pre-filed?
Yes,
It has been pre-filed.
it better have been pre-filed because it's been there for a while.
Well, my thing is, if it hasn't been pre-filed, and we okay this letter, and then it's filed, and there's other things attached to it that we might not agree to it, And we've already sent our letter for endorsement.
The letter, I think, pretty much states what our purpose is in endorsement. And if it were amended, I think our letter would have to state as amended. And because it doesn't state in here that it's amended, I think they will recognize this as a letter of support for the bill as introduced.
Well, we can't say as amended, not knowing what an amendment might be. Actually, I think Mr. Davis does have a pretty good point. I'm not saying, I'm not
Right.
opposed to
Against
the
it.
letter,
Sure.
but we might just want to wait until it's actually filed. I know you said you hope it's been pre-filed, but we're not positive, you know.
Well, I
I'd
don't
like to
have
see-
a problem with that.
I want to kind of see it first, you know, I know what it was last year, you know, I mean, we all agreed to it then.
Right.
So I think we'll probably, I don't see him as not, quote, probably supporting it, but, yeah, I would like to see I feel we're a little bit ahead of ourselves, because they just started session, and
Well, you
my
make a
knowledge,
good
it hasn't
point.
been
I don't think it's going to compromise anything if we
I don't think 2
wait
weeks
till
will
it's
hurt us.
filed, because no one's going to be looking for the letter of endorsement until it is filed, and at least for what I know about.
Yeah.
So you have no objection to waiting?
Well, we're just trying to get a confirmation from council that they're okay with this. I would assure you that we would not send it out until you had copies of it being filed, but.
Yeah, I don't see the need to come back to a work session if we wait. I mean, I trust you.
Mhm.
Everybody
We'll
okay
certainly
with
make
that?
sure that the council gets a copy of the filed legislation.
Before we send
And
the
if
letter.
anyone has objections, once they see that, please make Mrs. Hurley aware of that.
Are there any changes to the legislation this year, or is it staying same as
No,
last year?
it's the same, yeah, right.
They're hoping.
Ms. Hackley, were you going to say something?
I was just, because I hadn't seen this before, was there any opposition to this?
No. Well, there was, by the Public Justice Center, they were concerned about the timeframe of notification. They wanted an exact date within 14 days. The legislation said that the tenant would be notified a minimum of 14 days, which could mean the tenant would have at least 14 days. They could have 21 days before the eviction process actually was expedited. The Public for Justice Center, it was somewhat confusing because he stated that he wanted it to be an exact date. And, my argument to him was this is to establish the process. When the sheriff calls and says it's going to be on March 3rd, that's when you have the exact date, and that's when it's posted for the tenant regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So, that wasn't really part of the process that we needed to establish by law.
Any more discussion?
I don't see it filed, I'm checking right now, I should look and see if it was filed. I don't see it pre-filed yet, but probably, if not today, then probably tomorrow they start up.
So everybody's good waiting until it is filed?
Yeah.
All right, anything further? All right, before we move into closed work session, I would like to recognize Salisbury City Councilman, Council Lady, Michelle Gregory. Thank you for attending our meeting. I hope it was.
I wish I had realized to go up for the public comments before the work session, because I had some stuff to say.
I was thinking the same thing. You
I
could-
had some stuff to say about it, so.
But next time I'll point you out.
Yeah, please do, because I didn't realize I didn't follow
If
my
you would like to go to the podium right now,
I would love
make
to.
a statement, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you.
And Ms. Sarah Rain from the Coastal Association of Realtors, thank you for attending.
Thank you, Council President, for letting me speak. I understand that this is, the marijuana issue is confusing, to say the least. But as someone who has intimate knowledge of the effects of medical marijuana, for those who do not know, my eldest son, he is 25 years old, and at 18, which is a very late diagnosis, he was diagnosed with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. It is a very rare form of epilepsy. Of people diagnosed in epilepsy, only 1% of people diagnosed with epilepsy are diagnosed with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. He's literally 1 in a million. So with this particular diagnosis, it's called intractable, which means that traditional medications do not treat it or cure. I don't want to say cure, because there's no cure for epilepsy, but it does not stop the seizures and the symptoms. We went through probably 15 different medications at various times. He's currently on a regimen of 3 prescription pills and prescription marijuana. During that time, while we were trying to find the right formula to get him down from completely infunctional, he could not even stand, walk, talk, eat, anything. He could not function in any way. He stayed in bed 24 hours a day. And he also has an implant that's similar to a pacemaker called a VNS, a vagus nerve stimulator. Between those the medications that we've found and that vagus nerve stimulator, we've gotten his seizures down to somewhere about from half a dozen to a dozen a day, which means he can have some sort of quality of life. Before that, we would spend frequent time in the ICU, up to 2 weeks at a time in ICU with him intubated, kept sedated because of the side effects of his seizures. So now, when medical marijuana became legal in Maryland, it was a godsend for us because we had been fighting the fight to get him healthy, or at least control the seizures somewhat, for years at that point. For him, he is not able to intake through smoke. Trying to get him to take a breathing treatment for his asthma is an ordeal in and of itself. I couldn't imagine trying to ask him to smoke a little vape pen or something like that. That just would not happen. He takes it through edible form that I have to actually make myself, because with the strain we found, it's only available in the flower rather than the CBD oil. Well, trust me, we've tried many, many variations, and we found one strain that works particularly well. I bake him brownies, a dozen brownies, lasts him almost a month. But if a law like this were to pass, they were comparing it to alcohol. Here's what I would compare it to: an asthma inhaler. My daughter has asthma as well. She takes her her treatment with her wherever she goes, so that when she has an attack, she can inhale it. If my son has a seizure, we supplement with CBD oil on top of his. He would get a dose of CBD oil, which is usually about a drop. The amount of THC in that is minimal. But if we're in a public place, I'm going to give it to him to forego him having either an injury or aspirating, which is often how we end up in the hospital. So I would like you guys to consider the unintended consequences of a law such as this, because that would mean that I would no longer be able to, in a public place, administer his medication, his prescribed medication for this disability. So while I totally understand the anecdotal stories that they had are heartbreaking, and I understand their position, I want you to think carefully before proceeding with this legislation as to how it will affect families like mine who rely on this to keep their son alive. Okay? Thank you very much.
All right. Do we need a motion to go into closed session?
You do, you should.
All right. Need a motion to go into closed session?
So move.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion carried. Thank you all very much for attending.